Hi, Alan Stratton from As Wood Turns. I recently returned from the Oregon Woodturning Symposium. One of my favorite things at any symposium is the instant gallery. One of the items there that I decided to make from my project this time was a rattle. Now those in the instant gallery I believe were by Sally Alt, which is fine, but I make them my way. But one of the big questions in making a rattle for a child is what size. I've heard all sorts of different formulas from people on what size to make it. I decided to go to the source, to section 1510.4, and in that section of the code it describes a test fixture that the toy, or in this case it's specifically for rattles, must pass. And that is, in this particular size hole, no part can come through to the back side. So test okay there, and it has to be the most unfavorable way to position it. So that one came close, but no, it didn't come through. So my rattle passes section 1510.4. So here, let's go ahead and make it now. I decided to turn this rattle from a branch from a walnut tree that died in my yard. With my bowl gouge, it does not take long to cut off the bark and the wormholes just under the bark. Then, as is typical in lots of lathe work, I use my skew to cut tenons on both ends. By the way, if you pronounce this as a tendon, please look up the correct pronunciation for the woodworking context. Now for one end that will resemble an egg. After extensive research of egg proportions, I found that eggs vary as much as chickens do. The egg end is much too big, so the first task is to reduce the diameter. My bowl gouge to the rescue again with peeling cuts with one wing. Then one end, the big end, will resemble a half sphere. So I will use the octagon technique. One difference is that my egg will have a length equal to 1.35 to 1.39 times the diameter. The other difference is that I will leave some space between the two halves for a future mortise and tenon joint. You can check out my several videos on that topic. Then shape the little end by eye. I will have to have a chicken check it out. After the big end looks spherical, I move to the small end. I almost go too far. Just in time, I cut a new tenon for the small end and a very shallow tenon for the big end. Now switch to a chuck. Here's a little cleanup, and drill a 3/8 inch hole in the small end. This will receive a tenon from the handle. It is also a good starting hole for hollowing. Hollowing end grain like this project is easiest done with a spindle gouge. With the gouge nearly vertical, a peeling cut takes wood from the center out. This is easy because the cut is in side grain. If I were to cut from the outside in like a bowl, the cut would start cutting end grain, a harder choice. After most of the wood is gone, I finish up with a round nose scraper, although no one will ever stroke it with their finger. I also cut a small mortise. Then swap the wood for the big end with that teeny tenon. I will have to blend out that tenon later. Now to fit the tenon to the mortise. This is a repetitive process of cutting a chamfer to help estimating, measuring, cutting, and so on until it fits. Then that tenon on the big end is perfect to remount into a chuck to allow refining the exterior. This is spindle gouge and skew work. Then sand. Likewise, the mortise on the big end serves for an expansion hold while I trim the exterior of this little end. At first, a cone center in that hole provides security for as long as possible. Again, spindle gouge and skew, then sand, and then epoxy the two halves together. The previous work and sanding near the chuck jaws left a little ridge around the joint. I can mount the egg in a cup faceplate secured by the cone live center. At least this is one option, and sand again. I want to disguise the joint with a burn line, but a single burn line will only make the joint obvious. Instead, I want a pair of lines. 3 lines is an option, but then they need to be equally spaced. I make a groove with a point tool, then burn with a burn wire. For the opposite end of the rattle, I scrounged my pile of excess segmented rings for a maple ring. I do not trust single rings. I prefer to reinforce them with additional rings. So for this piece, I'm parting this ring in half after mounting it to faceplates with double stick tape. I usually face off rings on my metal lathe, but recently one viewer complained that he wanted to see it on the wood lathe. So here we go. Using a round nose scraper, I flatten the ring and then sand with my sanding board until it is flat. Then spread glue and sandwich a leftover ring of cherry into the middle. For this glue up, I make sure that all glue lines are staggered for side grain joint strength. After the glue dried overnight, it is time to drill for the handle's tenon. Title 16 of Section 1510.4 of the Code of Federal Regulations describe a test fixture specifically for rattles. This end will be most at risk. I measure and mark some extra. This will be the diameter of this end disc. I always mark with the lathe off. That is my safety tip. It does not take much work with the spindle gouge to cut this ring down to size. Wonderful shavings, almost like wet wood. Check to ensure size, then move on to rounding off the corner, then sand. I use double stick tape to transfer this disc to another faceplate. Then I can round off the opposite corner, then sand. How about some padauk for the handle? I have it mounted directly into long nose jaws. Since my bowl gouge is handy, I use one wing to round off the padauk. Then proceed to cut a 3/8" tenon with a parting tool, ground end wrenches, and a skew. I use the end wrenches in 2 steps. One size larger to hog off wood and the target size, which leaves it slightly large. Once it fits, I can start shaping. This piece will be a plug for the hole in the segmented disc. Once the shape is almost there, sand it before it breaks off. Now extend the roughed section with the skew peeling cut. This works great for small spindles. Then on to cutting and fitting the tenon. This time I cut to size near the base to then extend with the skew. Then work down the diameter a bit more towards the chuck. Now reverse the handle using that end tenon in the chuck. I still need more wood for the handle, so peel some more off. But now it is too long. Cut a tenon and part it off. I hope I am on the home stretch now. But wait! I need a new tenon before I can get serious about shaping. The problem will be that the other end is flush to the jaws. I'll have to deal with that later. I am shaping this with my skew. Yes, I still get catches, but it leaves such a great surface. It's worth it. Much better than a spindle gouge. I've seen people do similar with the wing of a huge spindle roughing gouge, but at that point the tool edge in use resembles a skew. I managed to get close to the jaws, but not quite enough. Then sand. And since there is a tenon on both ends, I swap it again to sand the very end, and glue it all together. For a finish, I do not want a film finish that could be chewed off. Walnut oil is a penetrating finish that is also food safe. I wish the walnut presented better, but the rest worked together great. Best of all, my rattle passes the regulation test. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe on my website because it is more reliable than YouTube, and tell your friends about my videos. I appreciate your comments and questions. Every week I create a new woodturning video. Always, please wear your full face shield. My best safety tip, anytime the lathe is running. You are worth saving and it can help.